Hello and welcome to Unknown Unknowns, a podcast about the things you didn't know about growing a business. My name is Nick and this is Patrick.
Hi.
And we bring you this series in the vein of trying to learn a few things about growing a business. We are business owners ourselves and we wanted to know what don't we know about business, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I think everybody learns, you learn as a business owner from other business owners, especially those that are in different industries from you. And one of the things that hurts you the most, I think, as a small business when you start is the things that you don't know you were supposed to do. So things around, in this episode, HR specifically.
HR, a traditionally yawn fest, just kidding. HR is obviously very important. One of the things I didn't realize is that even when you're starting just on your own or with a very small team, HR plays a really pivotal role in how your business starts to scale and grow as your business scales and grows.
Yeah.
So I found that really insightful. So I think we can jump on in, listen to Karen. I'm going to disappear behind the cameras and you'll see Patrick talk to Karen.
Hope you enjoy.
Karen, thank you for coming.
Hi, Patrick.
Really glad to have you here.
Thank you.
I know we caught up before about HR.
Yeah.
And one of my questions for you was, what the hell is it? So I thought it's totally worth sharing that out with people and putting that, I'm not the only one who's confused.
Yeah.
So yeah, maybe let's start there.
Mm-hmm.
Actually, let's not. Let's go back. Tell us a bit about yourself first and then let's go into HR.
Okay.
You have a business, HR People.
Yep.
How did you get into the journey on HR? Was that something you always wanted to do, or?
No, kind of fell into it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Like most people, right?
Yep.
I think everyone falls into their job. I feel like it's the most common story.
Yeah. Yeah, most do.
Mm.
I worked my way up through the law firms,
Mm-hmm.
and companies got bigger.
Yep.
And my role just got more and more HR responsibility,
Mm-hmm.
but back then they called it, the personnel manager or the office manager.
Mm.
And I was just responsible for the staff. I worked predominantly for law firms, so they would just say, look, there's a drama with such and such, can you help sort it out?
Mm-hmm.
And before you knew it, you were sort of ending up looking after more and more staff-related things, and new employees had come on board, and you do the recruitment and you do the payroll, and you'd walk around and make sure that people were, safe in their office environment, and the next thing you know, you're in a HR role.
Yeah.
So I had to. I did a degree,
Yep.
even though by that stage I'd sort of been probably 8 or 9 years in a HR responsible role, but being in the legal fraternity, they really put a lot of value in pieces of paper. So
Yep.
went off and did the uni degree for about 6 years part-time whilst I was still working full-time, and then sort of worked my way up through the law firms, but be careful what you wish for.
Yeah, okay.
I ended up in a law firm. I had 52 bosses nationally, so I was in a national role. I had a few hundred staff and I had 52 bosses, so not necessarily the best place to be.
That's a lot of places for things to roll downhill from.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Yep.
So I made the decision a few years ago that I wanted to get out of the law firms and try something a bit different. And a couple of other outside of legal opportunities came up. They were okay, they worked fine. I ended up with a fairly large redundancy, and I used that to set up HR People.
Okay.
So HR People's been going since about 2008, 2009. And we've sort of just been growing it through since then. And it's an environment where all the ladies work from home. So we're all home officed, which is what I wanted.
Yeah.
The law firm was all about, I commuted to work. I spent an hour on the train of a morning and an hour at night. I spent from 7 in the morning till 7 at night, at the office. And because nobody really put a lot of value in HR, especially law firms, they're not paid very well.
Yeah.
So my focus was very
lawyers
much.
are.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I was very much wanting to
Yeah.
to put the focus for my girls on being able to work from home, not having to commute, and earn a decent salary.
Right.
So I wanted to create that environment, and that's my plan now. I'm not about to take over the world where our fees aren't huge, so we're not going to all be rich and sail off into the sunset or anything like that. But I wanted to just set up an environment where all the girls, everybody in our team has either small children or children with special needs. With one of our girls in Toowoomba's got a 2-year-old, and another one's got a 5-month-old, and Karen's, little ones, or big one now, special needs. So it's important for us to create the environment that they can work when they want to work.
I mean, that's fantastic, but I guess it's also not surprising at the same time that, when you went out and started a business, the focus was on, I guess, the people and how their time frames would be and how they would fit in their lives, obviously being, pretty much your entire job beforehand.
Yeah.
I do have a trick question for you though, or possibly a little curveball. When you got your redundancy, as the HR person, did you sign yourself up for your own redundancy? Like, did you just make sure it was really creamy?
No,
Should we all be doing
actually,
that?
funnily enough, they contacted us and said to Karen and I, said, we've got all these redundancies coming, so go through the list and just start working your way through the list.
Yeah.
And I looked down the list and got to the bottom and found my name.
Yeah.
I called them and I said, you are aware I'm on your redundancy list.
Yeah.
I said, I should start with myself. That'll really stuff you up. So anyway, we did ourselves last. But yeah, we had to make about 50 people in the business redundant. But
Right.
I was on the list.
Right.
A little bit of a shock for both of us.
Yeah. Look, I really actually want to come back to that. But before we do go into that, because I really want to hear about those conversations and what those are like, because you see a lot of that in movies and things like that, but I don't think or, in real life, you might have been on the other end of that, what it's like from the person sort of giving the conversation, like, look, we have to let you go, etc. Before we do, can we just clarify HR, how is that any different from being the boss or being just a people person in the business? Like, what's the separation there when you have people in the business that you're trying to manage from a boss view to a HR person? Like,
Yeah.
what is it, I guess?
I think generally the boss is technically competent in a particular area. That's why they're the boss. That's why they've started the business. So they're either they're either IT, they're marketing, they're insurance. They've got architects, lawyers, accountants. That have got an area of specialisation, and they start a business. But just because you're a specialist in that area doesn't necessarily mean that you're a people person.
Right.
And to run a successful business and to grow a successful business, you really got to have those bells and whistles. You've really got to understand the law, the compliance, workplace health and safety,
Right.
What people have to be paid, contracts, what type of contract people can and can't have, and being careful to avoid getting yourself into sham contracting arrangements and all of that sort of thing. So just because you're professionally competent in an area and can run a successful business doesn't mean you're necessarily going to be able to be the people person as well.
Right.
So for us, that's our focus. We leave them to do what they do best, which is running their business, and we come in and look after the staff. I mean, we always say, take that, off your table and put it onto ours. Sometimes we refer to our role sometimes as the tissues and tears.
Right.
Let us take care of the staff for you, and let us take care of their development and all of the things to make them feel cared about. And then there's less turnover. We had one company when we joined them, their turnover was extraordinary, especially in a couple of their areas.
And
like
by turnover
customer
you
service.
mean?
So the number of people who left the organisation.
Right. Staff turnover.
Yeah. So they had one department that was over 100% turnover. And the other departments weren't much better. They were spending $250,000 a year in recruitment fees. So when we came in, our focus was to get rid of the high turnover, make people feel a bit more warm,
Right.
and loved. Have performance reviews and, sit down with them and talk about their positions and prepare position descriptions and have social clubs and, take them out and have the boss walk around the office or send out more communication, do employee surveys, make them feel loved. And then our turnover decreased substantially, and they stopped spending, $250,000 in recruitment fees. And I guess they appreciated us a lot more because they realised our salaries were a lot less than the money they were spending on their recruitment fees.
Okay, and I think you touched on some points there that I wouldn't have known about previously. That HR, like you said, it's tissues and tears, and that's I think what a lot of people see it as. That's what I sort of envisioned. It's the touchy-feely side of the business and people. But I think you touched on some important points that I wouldn't have known. Like there's legal and health and safety issues that you help navigate as well. It's not just about hire someone to make people feel nice. It's also about there are other things that you've got to be careful. As a business owner, you can't keep track of all those things.
When we start off with a client, the first thing we do is a HR audit, and then we ask them a lot of questions, and then we give them a HR gap analysis report. So basically this says, these are all the things you're doing really well, tick, 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 and this is what you're not. And we start from a legislative perspective, so contracts, making sure they've got their corporate and employee policies, workplace health and safety, payroll, awards, classifications, all of those sorts of things. We give them the list, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, from a legislative perspective, and we price them all. To be honest, we don't get to the warm and fuzzy stuff very often or until quite later. Because most companies are very small and really need to focus on compliance. They need to just make sure that they're ticking the boxes, because the fines that are out there are extraordinary.
So from the compliance side, then I think we spoke about this before too. Like when you're small, obviously that compliance is make or break. Like if you do it right, awesome. If you do it wrong and you get chased up, it's sort of like that can be the end of your business, small business, medium business, whatever it is. So I guess is the way people tell when they start to need a HR person, is it as soon as they hire someone, more or less? Like as soon as you're actually going, I'm not going to be just me anymore, I need a part-time person or an intern even, or something to that effect, it's at least the opener to that conversation?
It actually goes a step back even further. You're responsible for yourself. So as a sole proprietor, you need to make sure that your environment is safe, because if it's not, and you've got the right contracts in place for yourself, your business is set up correctly. You're starting to document your processes and procedures. If you document your processes and procedures from early on, then when somebody starts, look what you've got. Something ready to hand over to your first employee, because it's all in your head. And when somebody comes along, they can't mind read. So if you have got what you do documented, you start with a little position description and then you build it into a little bit of a manual. When that person starts, they've got something to guide them and to tell them how to do the job. So that it should go back to you. It should go back to you as the worker and getting yourself ready to get your first employee. And then then we come in when you've got your first employee and we get their contracts together for them. We make sure you're paying them the correct amounts. We make sure that their induction is correct. A lot of people leave businesses very early on because their induction is appalling. They spend the first 2 weeks in an absolute baptism of fire. You've got no idea as the business owner what you're doing. You're not training them. You don't speak to them. You don't communicate with them. They're trying to learn your systems. They're trying to learn how things are run. And they get to week 2 and go, no, too hard. And they bail and leave you. And you've just spent all this money and all this time getting them on board and training them. And it's a huge cost to then have to start all over again. So for us, making sure that you've got great induction. And if you've got all of that written and got that in place before you put your first employee on, then you've got your first induction ready to go in that first couple of weeks. So it's ideal to start before you've even got your first employee. And then your first employee can train your next one. They've been trained properly. They know, all of your processes, your procedures, your software, got it all under control. And now you don't have to do it, they can do it. And they train up the next person and so on and so forth. And they can each be responsible for the next person that comes in. They become their mentor, their buddy, they look after them. and they feel responsible. They feel like they're doing the right thing by the business.
Okay. So I guess it's funny how we've had some conversations, I guess, here in these chairs with other people, how often, no matter what the area is that we talk about, procedures come up a lot.
Yeah.
And it's super important, obviously, like you say, from an induction point of view. How are their procedures in, I guess, for want of a better term, the feel-good point of view, as in to make, to keep staff happy? Like, what kind of procedures can you put in place for that? And how do you audit that? Like, I might have Friday afternoon beers from 4 p.m. or something like that with staff. How do you audit that they're happy with that? Is that something that you would do, come in like a HR person would do? Or?
Yeah. So we do a little employee survey. It's all online. We email it to them all. They fill out half a dozen questions. It's a little bit of a, do you feel loved? And, are you feeling you've got good feedback, good communications in place? They always say no to that one. And then, how long do you plan to stay? And would you recommend this business to somebody else?
Right.
And if you've got about half a dozen or so people, it's good to start doing that sort of thing to find out how your business is going.
Okay.
And depending on how many people you've got and how many people actually fill it out, gives you a level of the engagement. If everybody fills it out, great. You're showing that you're engaged, you want to be there.
Right.
You've asked me questions, I'm going to answer them. If they don't answer them, they're not engaged and they're most likely going to leave anyway.
Yeah, I like that. I like it. I like how much that Venn diagram seems to match now with what I would do with web visitors on a site. If they're engaging with that, awesome, I know that's a good thing.
Yep.
So how much then could you, I guess, for internal keeping that thing moving, keeping people happy, how much could you more or less copy paste what you would do with customers? Like, it's the exact same thing, send them out a survey, speak to them about how they're feeling, sort of those exact same processes replicated internally, or is there an extra layer of complexity on that or something that I'm not aware of?
We have quite a diverse range of clients, so I certainly wouldn't treat my trucking clients the same as I would treat my professional, services clients. There is going to be completely different layers and different requirements and different documents, different, meetings and workshops that you would have with the two.
But if I'm a law firm and, like you're saying, I'm sending those, say, surveys to my staff to see how they're feeling, can I, it's a similar practice that I would do obviously with the clients that I had as a lawyer in a law firm, send them out and say, how are you feeling about our services, etc. Is it essentially just the same, just gauging that response and then adjusting for what you find?
And, we'll always put a few extra questions in. We'll ask them where their pain points are.
Okay.
If they're experiencing something in the business that, they would like to find out a little bit about.
Okay.
Like we ask, for instance, do you feel like, you're living with, or your boss lives his values? And I love the response to that.
Right.
It's like, I have no idea what the values even are.
Right.
Does he have values? Never been told about them, never had them shared with me, wouldn't know what they were if I fell over them.
Right.
And that's quite interesting then, because they're going, they should be living the values of the business and all of this sort of thing. And then most people respond going, I have no idea what they are. Does he have values? Has actually somebody talked about those?
Right.
Have we had a little session to, share the values of the business with us? And we quite often find that that's a big issue for employers. As I said, when you start off, you're all by yourself. And you think, I've got these values and this is why I've started this business. I want to help people. But you don't necessarily always communicate them very well.
Okay.
You think it, but you don't necessarily communicate it. We always encourage to have open forum sessions with your team, to let them talk about theirs, you talk about yours, you talk about the business, you talk about where it's going and what you want to do, have a bit of a business planning day and a bit of a SWOT analysis with the team, strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, threats. And you talk about all of those things. It's a good day. You can have a whiteboard day and just let them go crazy.
Okay.
Nothing's off the table. give us some ideas. You know, what do you think we should do for new clients, marketing days? You know, where do you think the business should go?
Right. So let's dig into that, because I think that really ties into HR, right? That workplace culture, because in a sense, then you don't set it, but you're helping us to audit whether we're living it.
Yeah.
To a degree. So where do you think that culture should start? Like, when I'm the first person on my own, start setting that sort of culture up. Like, I don't, if one of our values would be that, I don't know, we're always, truthful or something like that. Sitting down and being truthful with yourself, essentially.
Truthful, ethical, yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I don't like using words that vague, but, but I mean, everyone should be truthful as far as,
But that's a value.
Yeah.
You can go through the list of values. There's business ones, there's personal ones. You should put both of them down. Like,
Okay.
put the two together.
Right.
And because that's what you want. You'll generally find that the business values, a lot of them are you as the business owner's personal values.
Okay.
It's what you think.
Yeah.
It's how you feel. Like we, at the HR people, we all like to educate. We like to share. One of our values is sharing. We want to share information with other people. We want to educate other people. So that's our main value. That's the
living that
one.
right now.
We do. We try to do that every day. We try when we're standing in front of, accounting groups or associations or whoever it is, networking groups, and standing up in front of all of them, we want to try and share as much information as we possibly can, because that's our leading value. That's what we want to do. And you'll find that generally your business values are very much about your personal ones.
Okay.
And then that's your culture. If you're that type of person, if you're a little bit innovative and outgoing, and you're a little bit of a natural entrepreneur, then that's what your business culture is going to be. And that's what you'll employ those type of people. You have to, because that's what you're comfortable with. You've got to spend 8 hours a day with these people, sometimes more. You want to make sure that you're working and with people that you can work with. You want to have somebody with similar values to you, similar goals. And I've noticed that with our girls, as they've all come on board, they all have very similar goals to the first couple, Karen and I. They have very similar goals to us and very similar values to us, because it's what naturally happens. When you start to talk to somebody, you go, yep, they'd fit really well with the rest of the team.
So I guess when I'm defining my business plan and thinking about sort of the culture that I want to instill into the business, etc. I'm still a sole trader before I hire anyone. I guess my first step then is to decide, obviously, what the culture is that and what my values are. And then I guess as I scale, I really want to get into this, because I don't think people do it from my experience. Should I be having those cultural values basically written down as a tick box for when I'm hiring?
Yeah.
Because I think that, and correct me if I'm wrong, a lot of the way businesses hire is, that person was well presented, we liked them, their CV says they have the technical skills, good enough.
Yeah.
Is that sort of what you see before you go into a place and change it around and do your magic, or?
Well, it's it's interesting when you're going through the recruiting process. If you're recruiting for yourself, obviously, if you're doing the interviews yourself, if you'll notice people's body response to. If you start espousing your values, and they're sitting there, like this, and you've really got a fairly good idea that they're really not comfortable with what you're talking about, that they'll come on board because they're technically competent, and they'll do the job because they're technically competent, because they've applied for the role, and they've ticked the boxes, they've met the selection criteria, and they're sitting in front of you. But if you start talking about your values and where you want to go, your culture, what you want to build, and they start to add to that, they want to grow it with you, they want to build it with you, and they're leaning in and they're starting to get involved in the conversation, and they're giving you fabulous ideas at the interview, they're the ones you've got to snavel up very quickly.
Right. Yeah.
Even though they might not have all the technical competencies that you're absolutely looking for, if they've got the attitude, the motivation, the drive, and they're sitting across from you in an interview, you go, you know what, I can teach the technical stuff, but I want that. I want that person working with me. And sometimes, you've got to do that. You've got to take somebody that doesn't have all the bells and whistles, but I want to grow them into the role because they're so motivated. They're sitting here, they're talking the way we're all talking. You know, they've got the similar interests. They want to share, they want to educate, they want to get up in front of people and talk in front of, you know, groups. And they're the people that we want to include in our company.
So I guess what you're saying from there is that the cultural fit of the person you hire is much more important than the technical skills.
Absolutely.
Which
and we always say that.
Yeah.
You know, when we're helping recruit for a role, even we go, look, we've ticked, you know, 7 of the 9 boxes or 7 of the 10 even. You need to have more than 5 or 6. You know, we like 7 or 8. But, okay, they're missing a couple of your, you know, your technical competencies, but spoke to them on the phone, did a Skype interview or did a face-to-face interview with them, and they were really switched on and really motivated. They'd read the website, they'd been on the website, they talked about the business, they were really involved. They wanted to work there. When we asked them the question, you know, why are you applying for this job? They had a really great response, and we give them that information, and then we go, okay, so you can teach the technical competencies, you're good at your job.
Right.
You wouldn't have a successful business if you weren't good at the technical areas.
Yeah.
So teach them the 3 things they're missing, but take them because they're motivated, they're excited. You know, they know a lot about your business before they've even come for their interview, and they're the ones we want to, you know, snavel.
Yep. So let's switch gears from good people and talking about toxic people, because you know, you famously said to me that toxic people don't deserve to have a job.
Yep.
And I can't disagree with that, to be honest. If anyone's ever worked with one, and most people have,
Yep.
it's hard to disagree with that.
Yeah.
Look, is there a way that we can identify them reliably in the interview process, outside of that cultural fit, or just after, you know, are we looking for little frictions? Are there little things that we can spot to say, we might keep an eye on that person?
Well, you know, it depends on what type of interview it is that you're having with them. You know, if you're face-to-face, then, you know, sometimes they're going to start to, they'll talk over you. So you'll ask a question and they'll finish a question and then they'll answer your question with another. Rather than answering your actual question, they'll start answering your question with another question, or they'll start going off on all of these tangents. They'll talk over you constantly. And as soon as you start to feel someone talking over you, then clearly when they get into a work environment, that's what they naturally do. So they're going to talk over everybody, the clients, you know, your co-workers, they're going to be more focused on themselves than they are on your business and what you're trying to bring them into. We've had situations where people have, you know, sort of said, you know, oh look, I'm fabulous, I'm great, you know, you don't really even need to do any more reference checks. I'm the best person for the job. You know, you'll see that, and you're sitting there going, okay, these are sending alarm bells all over the place. They don't want me to do reference checks. They're trying me to cut all these corners. They're talking over you, and you're thinking, no, okay, we've got to cut this. Even though their technical ability might be great, it doesn't mean that they're a good fit for your business.
Yeah. Okay. So we sort of, I guess, it's pretty almost common sense to go in that interview process, especially, if not after, if they make it through somehow, you're really just looking for those, just lack of that basic respect. Let me finish my sentence. Actually let others finish theirs.
Yeah.
You know, give everyone room for their ideas and things like that. And if you see that, that's a good warning sign to be like, all right, we might need to cut this person down really quickly.
And obviously, you know, in the first 6 months, you're going to start to see that, and then, you know, you do something about it. And, you know, the key thing with all of these people is that you as an employer have a duty of care to your other staff to get these people out of the workplace, because they are dealing with them even more than you are. If they're in your face, imagine how much they're in the face of your co-workers.
Perfect, yeah.
Imagine how much they're in the face of your clients.
Yeah.
You know, so you've got a duty of care to your clients and your co-workers to make sure that if these people are in your environment, get them out as quickly as you possibly can. If they get past, you know, the 6 months, I'd be very surprised if they did. Sometimes some people just think it's easier to keep them on.
Yep.
And, you know, I was sort of explaining to you that we did have a client that who came to us who had a person in her business for 2 years. They were, you know, miserable. The environment was just absolutely miserable. They were losing clients. The turnover in the business was very high, but the employer didn't want to rock the boat. She was worried about Fair Work coming down on her and all of those sorts of things. We got involved. We took over the process and we got this person out within a few weeks. And, you know, they were looking forward to Christmas and the rest of the year, and they were just excited to come to work. You know, and I knew that the turnover would decrease, that she would not have that problem anymore. And I've also think it's given her a little bit more, I guess, a bit more nous now to get rid of these people earlier. Okay. And I guess now she's a little bit more aware of what they do, and you know, undermining nature. Very much is what toxic people are. They're very undermining. Yep. And once you start to see that, you've got to get them out.
Yeah, okay. Yeah. It's interesting. I really like what you said there about you have a duty of care to your other staff, because I think a lot of people think about it that way. They think, we got to get this problem person out because that problem person is causing a problem for me, and not much about, hey, if they're a problem for me, like you said, imagine everyone else who's not, you know, higher up the ladder than they are, how hard it is to work with that person and how those people are suffering if you are as the owner. Oh, that's fantastic. Yeah, like that needs to be on a wall somewhere just to remind, most business owners should just have that there. It's like, is this person a problem for me? Yes, then
therefore they're a problem for everyone else.
Yeah.
And, you don't know what that person, your staff or your clients are dealing with.
Yeah.
You have no idea. You know, they're not always going to share with you what they're dealing with. So we could be putting them in an environment where they're being bullied by this person, and that's creating an enormous amount of grief for them at work and at home. And we have no idea what sort of, long-term effect that can have on your team. So, that's where your duty of care comes in, that if you do have someone that is doing that to your staff, then you've got to move them on as quickly as you possibly can, so that you're stopping that environment, that toxic environment, from spreading.
Right.
Because they have a terrible day at work. They're taking that home. The poor partner at home of an evening, or the children, get the repercussions of what they've had to deal with all day.
Yep.
That's not fair. That's not fair for anyone. So we want to make sure that when we go into those environments and we see those type of people, that we make sure that we get them out as quickly as we possibly can.
Yeah, that's fantastic. Like, I just think it's super important, having worked with toxic people before. What can you do as an employee? Because I think some people who watch this will be employees looking to start a business and things like that. What can you do as an employee if your boss is toxic? And then that there's a HR company involved, or there's a HR person who's not your boss. What's your recourse there? Because I feel like that's a very precarious position that people get put in, because if the boss finds out it's me, it'll be worse than what it is, et cetera, et cetera, Is there some...
Well, HR is very much about confidentiality. Once somebody sits in front of you and it tells you that they've got a problem, and if you don't have that level of confidentiality, then don't go into HR.
Yeah.
You've got to be able to do that. It's, you've got to keep the information that they've provided to yourself. But what you do have to do is make sure that you're fixing that environment as best as you can.
Right.
And, if it means having a conversation with your boss, then, the boss, as long as they don't know where the information's come from, just saying that in general, I'm getting a bit of feedback in this area, that perhaps you need to be a little bit more mindful when you're having conversations with people. Perhaps watch your language, or perhaps watch the tone of your voice, and maybe spending time with your boss, giving them a little bit of lessons. And these days, it's very important that we do that, because the repercussions, not only for the staff, but for them. If they're found in the wrong, if they're standing there screaming and yelling at their staff on a regular basis, and then there is a complaint, and somebody comes along and says, look, I've had to resign, and because I can't work here anymore, what that's called is where the relationship has broken down irretrievably. and it's called constructive termination. So I've had to resign because I can't work for you anymore. And I then will go to Fair Work and say, look, I've had to resign. I'd like to put forward a constructive termination case.
Right.
How easy is it going to be for the employer to get fined if that's his mode of operandi? That's how he treats everybody. He screams and yells every day.
Right.
He sends emails in capitals. He talks over people in meetings. He's abusive. He swears all the time. Then when they have their case heard and they call a few of the staff in who have to turn up, they'll be subpoenaed to turn up, and they have to tell the truth. And they say, does your boss yell? Is he abusive? Well, they have to answer. They have to be truthful, or they'll be fined. And then the employer's got no chance. He'll be found at fault.
Right.
But on the other side, if you don't scream and yell at your staff, and you're a calm person, and you treat everybody nicely, and you work well, you play well in the sandpit with others, then that's great. If there is a constructive termination case that comes forward, they have to prove that you've done the wrong thing. So you would simply be able to say, here's 5 or 6 of my staff, or 3 or 4 of my staff. They'll all give statements of how I work with them on a daily basis. The staff have to be honest, otherwise they'll be fined.
How can I, as a boss, then work with HR to make sure that I'm not accidentally stepping out of that, line of what's appropriate?
Yeah.
Because it's difficult, especially I know in stressful situations. I think that one of the conversations we had in another interview, we spoke a little bit about your interpersonal relationships when you're running a business can suffer because of stress and things like that. And I think that's very true for in the workplace too, right? You can be snappy with staff because you're a little bit, stressed out, maybe losing a bit of sleep or something like that. You don't mean to be. But how can I as a boss, work with HR to audit myself and keep myself on that right track? And
There is a fine line between management and managing and bullying. Managing properly and bullying. As long as you maintain that, the bulk of the time, you do the right thing, you give them reasonable warnings, you have an informal chat before you have a formal chat, you have a talk to them before you go to a documented stage. So as long as you're keeping them communicated with and sharing with them, look, this is my concern. They might be arriving a little bit late, leaving a bit early, taking an extended lunch, and they do that regularly. And you bring that up with them and say, look, your punctuality's got a problem, I'm bringing that to your attention. It's just a chat, let's make sure it doesn't happen again.
Yeah, but if I'm the boss and I may be swearing it or whatever like that,
if you're normally a quite calm person, we all lose it.
Yeah.
It happens. Even, Mother Teresa loses it. But if you're normally a calm, collected person, and every now and then you scream, you're forgiven. You'll be forgiven. Your staff will go, hey, normally she's peaches and cream, she lost it. There's other things that have happened. Clearly not everything that I'm aware of, but clearly there's a reason for her losing her nana. But 9 times out of 10, she's calm. At the moment, she's a little bit uncalm, and I'm going to get out of here so that I'm not in the line of fire, but they forgive you. If it's a one-off, or even a couple, that's fine. But obviously, if it's the way you always act with them, and you're always yelling and screaming at them, then obviously they're not going to forgive you the faux pas every now and then.
Yeah. Okay. So really, I guess the headline should be just to be, keep an eye on yourself a little bit, and just remember that you should be treating these people, although they work for you, in a way that you would want to be treated, but like someone that is family, or like somebody who is close to you. Just because you pay their wage doesn't give you power over a person.
We always say, it's write an email, leave it sit for a few hours, even an overnight before you press send. If you're angry at someone because they've done something, give it a few hours, calm down, walk away. Don't press send straight away, because when you're angry, you don't necessarily always communicate very well.
Yeah, of course.
So we always say, take it easy, walk around, you know, take a deep breath, come back a few hours later and then press send, especially if you're sending that email to someone above you, the boss, you know. Get calm before you press send.
Right.
And if you're going to have a conversation with someone about what they're doing, make sure that you're very clear. Be very constructive. This is what you're doing that's annoying me, and this is what I want you to do in the future.
Right.
So I'm very clear. I've explained to you what you're doing that it is, and I've explained to you what I need from you to do in the future. As an example, you know, you're swanning in after 8:30, you're taking a bit longer over lunch, you're leaving the desk at, you know, 5 o'clock on the dot. I want you to arrive at 8:15 because it takes you 15 minutes to sit at your desk. So arrive at 8:15 so that by the time you're ready to start work, it's 8:30, leave at 1, come back at 2, you know, leave 5 or after. Not 2 seconds, you know, or 5 before 5.
Yeah.
And so I'm very clear. This is what's annoying me. Please don't do it.
Okay.
And make it very clear to them that, you know, if they do this other thing, I'll be much happier and we'll all work together a lot better.
Makes a lot of sense, yeah. Well, I think that's all the time we have. So thank you for coming in and talking about that. I didn't know some of those things. I really like some of the things you said about, you know, thinking of it from your duty of care and stuff like that. It's
Yeah.
really important.
Cool.
So yeah, thanks for coming.
All right, thank you, Patrick.